Palace of Westminster. This could become the most expensive air conditioning system in history. However, the bill for Westminster will be as nothing compared to the massive nuclear subsidy for Hinkley Point. It'll be 30 billion going on 60 billion. Theresa May's best decision as Prime Minister was to put Osborne's massive white elephant on hold. Her worst might be to give it the green light after all. The Chinese financiers, the French public company, will be laughing all the way to the Bank of England. But you set the agenda and you can call in anything you like. Within reason, of course. Phone 0345 6060 973, text 84850 or tweet at LBC or email alec@lbc.co.uk. This is the Alex Salmond phone-in with Ian Dale, LBC, leading Britain's conversation.
And don't forget, you can watch us live on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk or on the LBC Facebook page on Facebook Live. Alex, very good to see you again. It is quite a momentous day, isn't it? Because of something you just said there. Jeremy Corbyn won PMQs after a year. He's finally won.
Yeah, absolutely. And the most interesting thing about it, it was on Theresa May's home ground of grammar schools. So I think it was a good decision by Corbyn to go for that ground. He asked at last a series of short, pointed questions, none of which Theresa May knew the answer for. She'd been sitting on exam paper, it was nothing out of 10.
Why do you think that is? Because this is all being driven by her. She ought to be master of that subject, and yet clearly she was flailing.
Which made it very effective from Corbyn's point of view. Because if you ask somebody questions which a reasonable person would say, well, do you know the answer to that? Is it possible to pluck the latest unemployment figure for Worcestershire out of thin air? People say, well, no reason somebody would know that automatically. But if you ask a question on her favoured subject, the thing she's making the first mark of her premiership, then the general expectation among MPs, among her MPs, she should know the answers, and she simply didn't have a clue.
And the timing couldn't be better in a way. It's the day of the final leadership debate with Owen Smith tonight. We're going to be taking that live on LBC, I think, from 9 o'clock. And of course, it sends Labour MPs, those of whom have got a bit of an open mind, it sends them off to their conference in quite a good state of mind.
Well, I think that's probably quite, the ones with the open mind is probably quite a narrow field.
Yeah, as I said it, I realised how ridiculous it sounded.
But I was watching the faces because, I was surprised because he's taken so long just to master the art of asking questions. The Labour MPs were surprised. And who knows, maybe one or two of them were sitting there thinking, well, this guy Corbyn's not a bad lad after all. We should have been giving him more support. And certainly there was more enthusiasm at the end of Corbyn's questioning from Labour MPs than there was at the beginning. And I think that's probably the first time you can say that as well.
Don't forget, you can give us a call to ask Alec a question. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Let's go to Moad at Heathrow. Hello, Moad.
Hi.
Hello. Moad, on you go.
Hi, Alex. I'd like to ask you a question about Libya. Given the damning report today on Libya and David Cameron, and recognising really how difficult the situation was and the difficult position that David Cameron was in, I'd like to understand what you would have done differently, really, had you had the premiership. Well, and given the same information and the same circumstances that Cameron found himself in.
Yeah, the committee report is damning, Mohad. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the reports on it, but it's a pretty comprehensive, damning report, and of course done by a majority of Conservative MPs on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. So it's not as if it's his political opponents.
And was it a unanimous report?
It's a unanimous report in the major recommendations, and it's it's pretty fruity stuff. Indeed, if in other circumstances, if David Cameron had timed his resignation as an MP after this, people might have said, well, he's going with the Foreign Affairs Committee.
He got wind of this. Somebody on the committee will have tipped him off, and that's why he went yesterday, because he can't now be held to account for it in the House of Commons.
Well, I've got to say that's a fair point. There's been concern about select committee reports leaking, but even if they don't leak formally, certainly, Cameron has enough friends on that committee for someone to have said to him, look, you're not going to like what he knows. Crispin Blunt is the chair of the committee, very independent-minded Conservative MP, tells it as it is, widely respected across the House, but no friend of government ministers and probably no friend of David Cameron.
But also fair to say, someone who you would describe as an Arabist.
Yes, I think that's fair to say, but certainly independent-minded. Of course, Cameron wouldn't go before of the committee, and that wouldn't do him any good. I mean, everybody else, wheeled up to the committee. If I remember right, I think even Blair attended that committee. But Cameron didn't go, standing on his dignity as a serving Prime Minister, saying he wasn't going before the Select Committee. So that wouldn't do him any. But to go back to Moab's question here, what are the things I would have done differently? Well, firstly, the differences with Iraq, this was a legal intervention. This was on behalf of United Nations protective instruction. So there's little question about its initial, at least, legality, and the committee doesn't make the point or say it's illegal. The committee focuses on the aftermath. The committee says basically they drifted into a regime change and then didn't have any planning for what happens afterwards. And in the most damning section of all, it accuses David Cameron of starting to think about other things. Other things came onto his agenda. That's Libya finished. And I think, well, the one thing I would have done differently, it depends how you calculate it, but one argument is that we spent 13 times, that's the UK, as much bombing Libya as we did attempting to reconstruct Libya. The committee has a different figure.
Fair enough, but that was a deliberate decision, wasn't it, on the part of David Cameron and indeed the French, because they'd seen it all went wrong in Iraq. So they decided, under Libya's request, as I understand it, to leave the Libyans to do it. Now, that was a perfectly logical thing to do, was it not?
Well, there's no Libyan request not to give reconstruction aid, I can assure you. And that was a
no, but in terms of handling the whole post-conflict scenario.
But the point the committee takes is surely well made. If you're going to have interventions, then you must plan for the aftermath, and you must be aware of the dangers of leaving a political vacuum. In Libya's in chaos. Al-Qaeda got a grip. It's now a hotbed of terrorism. Thousands of people are fleeing across the Mediterranean, and the aftermath of this intervention.
So what should happen now? Do you think that, having effectively escaped parliamentary scrutiny, do you think there ought to be a formal public inquiry, as there was after Iraq, to look into exactly what happened
Well, instinctively, I would say yes, because I believe these things should be inquired into. The one difficulty I've got is Chilcot took so long over such a period of years.
This ought to be a lot simpler, surely.
Well, yeah, you would hope so. But, I would say yes, you should have, and it should be within a defined timescale. There's no argument in this that we're still fighting the battle in Libya. It should start immediately and have a defined timescale. But the one thing, look, Chilcot reported just before the recess, right? And I don't think the word has been mentioned in Parliament over the last 2 weeks. I don't think the word Chilcot or Iraq has been mentioned. So if we spend so many years with so many damning decisions or damning findings in Chilcot, and then actually don't do anything about it, and clearly David Cameron hadn't learned the lessons of Iraq in terms of Libya, in terms of planning for the aftermath, which there was general consensus and agreement that hadn't been done.
Well, David Cameron wanted to be the true heir to Blair. Maybe he's now got his wish.
Well, heir to Blair in more ways than one.
0345 6060 973. More questions to Alex Salmond.